Hello, welcome to episode 152 of A Stitch in Time. I'm Carol. I am also known as Knitsnpurls on Ravelry, and I am coming to you from the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, not too far east of Vancouver. As always, I'd like to extend a special hello and welcome to any new viewers, and if you're a returning viewer, hello again and welcome back. Thank you for yet again taking some time out of your day to spend it with me. And also, of course, I have to say thank you to everyone who reached out in one way or the other since my last episode. I always so appreciate your kind comments and that you take the time to drop me a line and say hello, turning what could be a very solitary experience into an interactive one. Yet again, I just have to point out there, you may hear the sound of a fan in the background. It is not as hot here as the last time I recorded, but it is still sunny outside, and it's late afternoon, and the sun's starting to come through the window over there, and I tried it without the fan, and I was just finding it very uncomfortable. So hopefully it is not too loud or distracting. I didn't notice it too much when I was editing last episode, so hopefully you don't find it too annoying. This episode is focusing on socks, both completed pairs. Yes, I have not one, not two, but three to share with you. A pair I've been working on just as my go-to vanilla pair, and also a brand new cast on. So let's jump right in, shall we? So if you've been watching for a while, you know that way back in May, I thought it was a fantastic idea to cast on 3 pairs of socks in one day. They were all from Helen Stewart's Handmade Sock Society 3. And even though I got the first sock in each of the pairs done, relatively quickly, the other 3 second socks lingered for quite a while, and I recently got it in my head that it was time to get them off the needles, and that's what I've really focused on this week. So I'm happy to share them with you. So let's, I'll go in order from how they're laid out here. I don't think this is the order they came out. This first pair I did show you last week because I think I might have finished the heel flap. I think I was just starting the gusset last week. So these are the Luminary socks. They are knit from Skein Yarns Top Draw Socks, and this is the quill colorway. And as I've said all along, I am just so pleased with these socks. I love everything about them. I really like the color and the feel of the yarn. 1x1 twisted rib, just a very simple kind of lacy pattern that runs down the side of each side of the instep. And then there's this lovely star stitch textured pattern that runs down the front of the sock. There's a close-up look at it. So just a very classic looking pair of socks. I can see myself reaching for these, especially when I have, say, a good pair of jeans on, and I know that my pant leg might ride up a bit and show it off. They're just the perfect color to blend in with jeans, and I just love everything about them. So that is pair number 1. I'm going to slip these off the sock blockers, because I only have 2 pairs of sock blockers in this size, and I have 3 pairs of socks. So let's talk about this next pair. They are the Rainy Window socks. I think they were the second pattern to be released in the collection, actually. They are knit from Hazel Knits Artisan Sock, and it's a one-of-a-kind colorway. I bought this yarn as part of a sort of a special sale where they sell their Rogue skeins, which are the one-of-a-kinds, and also it was a knotted skein. So it came in two not quite equal lengths. I had no trouble knitting one sock out of the shorter length, and so had no problem, didn't have to add knots or anything to my work, or not knots, I wouldn't do that, but I didn't have to add yarn in anywhere. I was able to knit one sock from each sort of half of the skein. Does that make sense? So here they are. So once again, it's just a very simple sock with a cable pattern that's running down each side of the instep, and then again there's this textured pattern, raindrop pattern, that runs down the front of the sock. Again, 1x1 twisted rib, just a plain back, like the other pair too, just a simple classic heel slip stitch heel flap, and gusset, rounded toe. So these two I'm really happy with. There's none that I'm not happy with, but these two pairs especially, I really like them. So there's two. And then the third pair is already on, another pair of sock blockers. These are the Cirrus socks. They are knit from Fiber Nymph Dye Works Bounce Base, and they are in the denim colorway. I'm just checking something out. So here they are. Unlike the others, they do not feature a design that just runs down the front of the sock. There is an overall lace pattern. Again, 1x1 twisted rib. This seems to be Helen Stewart's go-to. This lacy pattern and slip stitch pattern. No, it's not a slip stitch pattern. It's I can't think of how you would describe it. Anyway, a little textured pattern here. Is that right? I can't see what I'm here in between these eyelet stripes. And then again, slip stitch heel flap and gusset, and just a plain foot with rounded toe. So one thing I did do on these socks, one thing I was concerned about when I was knitting them, is that they were kind of bunched down, and I wasn't sure if they were going to stretch out when I blocked them. And they did indeed get longer in the leg as they thinned out. So I was thinking they would end up being baggy, but I don't think they will be. Another thing I did is, if you can see, just because of the nature of this stitch pattern, there is an obvious line of where the beginning and end of round is. And what I did is, and I can't remember, I think this is the first sock. I blocked it a long time ago, and I think it sort of bounced back. I am not sure if it's that I knit more loosely on the second sock, and therefore it's a little bit longer and a little bit looser, or if this is just kind of bounced back over time a little bit more. In any case, they'll be fine. But what I did is, I think this was the first one. So you can see that line that runs down here. And I wanted to be able to wear that towards the inside of my leg. So what I did on this sock, instead of knitting it exactly the same so that that join would show on the outside of my right leg, I did the heel, I started the heel differently so that it positioned this towards the inside of my leg. So actually, I believe Helen Stewart, when she does her heel flaps, she will knit across the instep, I think it is, and then she starts, I can't remember exactly, she starts the heel flap on the right, with the right side showing. I always turn my work and start the heel flap with the wrong side showing. So on this one, I actually followed the pattern and did it with the right side showing. And then that enabled me to end up with a pair of socks that have that line on the inside of my leg. It's a lot of talking about one poor little pair of socks. But yeah, there we go. So again, 3 pairs of finished socks, and I just could not be happier about that. So of course, you know by now that when you finish a pair of socks, you must cast on a new one. And it is yet another pair from the Handmade Sock Society, 3. This time I'm casting on, or I cast on the Untitled Socks. When I got this pattern, I knew immediately which yarn I wanted to use. A while ago, I had purchased this set from Madeline Tosh. It is the Euro sock, and this one is called 11 Light, and this is 11 Dark. So you can see this one's all neutral with lots and lots of speckles, and this is tonal purple, kind of a royal purple. I am not sure if I will have enough yarn to knit. So you can see that there's contrasting stripes here on the leg, and then the toes have been knit in that contrasting yarn. I will basically, I'm going to knit as far as I need to add the toe on the first sock. I will not break the yarn. I will knit the toe, and then I'll weigh my skein, and I'll see if I have enough to do the other sock the same. If not, I will add a few more rounds onto with the plain yarn, and then switch to the contrast. So it'll all work out. I'll end up with contrasting toes. They might just be a little bit shorter area of contrast than is written, because I'm right on the borderline of what I need. So instead of just talking about it, why don't I show you? Love how these are coming along so far. Slip them on a soft blocker also, so you can get a good look. So there's the front. You can see there's a chevron pattern that runs just up the front, and it only runs for another, I think, 6 more rounds, and then it's plain knitting till the toe where you add in the contrast. The back is just plain striping like that. So once you've finished that part, it's just you know, knit, knit, knit till you know, add in the new color. Sorry, it's like I've zoned out for a second there. So yeah, very pleased. I just started these last night, and then worked on them this morning a bit too. I really wanted to get the striping done before I showed them to you, which is partly why it is after 3 o'clock and I'm only just beginning to record. The other part is some technical difficulties I had with my editing software. Anyway, and what I do like about this too, I don't know if you can tell, the contrasting stripes are kind of outlined with a row of purl bumps, so it gives it a little bit of texture too, in addition to the color change. So very happy. I've been wanting to cast these on. There is one other pattern that we have, I cannot remember the name of it, which came out before this one, but I opted to knit this one first. And if my math is right, and if my memory serves me correctly, I think we still have 1 more pair of socks from the collection, but I could be wrong about that. No tea today. I'm having just some Coke Zero, because like I said, it's hot. Last pair of socks, final pair of socks. I am still knitting away on Cameron's second pair of Father's Day socks out of this yarn, which is Cascade Heritage Wave. This is color 511. It's called the blue. It's just called Blues for very obvious reasons. As I mentioned last week, there's not a huge amount of change on these. You can see that there's a little bit of shading difference, but they're more or less the same the whole sock. So these I tend to work on when I can kind of not really look at them and just be focused on something else. So these are perfect for when I'm riding in the car or just sitting, having a visit with someone, or, you know, happy hour or whatever it is. I just, they're not exciting. These are for, this is production purposes only. But it was actually cooler this week, a few days ago, and Cameron has worn both the original pair that I knit him out of this yarn after Christmas, and also his new first pair of Father's Day socks. So he's worn both this week, so I know he will appreciate this, and then the final pair that I have. And I offered to knit him some more if he wanted to go to some more, or let's just say less subtle colors than I've chosen, but he wasn't really into purple and red and all that, so pink, his loss. So that is it for all the knitting I can show you this week. I am also knitting on a secret project. I cast it on yesterday, knit a ways, realized I'd read the pattern or interpreted the pattern incorrectly, had to rip out a bunch and start over. But it's another project that I do have kind of a deadline for. And I also know that the person that I'm making it for, is a good chance she'll see it on here if I show it to you. So I will just keep it a secret until this item has been received. And I will then share it with you after that. So last thing to talk about is some sewing I did this last week. So as you know, if you've been watching, I've recently made some placemats and a table runner for our kitchen. And I also showed you the last couple of episodes I had some new cups, and so I have sort of taken to drinking my tea out of a teapot lately. Normally I just make it in a David's tea mug with the infuser and make it cup by cup, but I've just been enjoying using my new teacups and have been making a pot of tea and then drinking it from there. And I've been using this teapot that I think my older son gave it to me a number of years ago. It says, "A mother's love grows by giving." It's really pretty. Usually it just sits in the cupboard and I don't use it. But I have been using it lately. But I don't have a tea cozy for this teapot. And so I was just wrapping a tea towel around it to try and keep the tea warm. And it was adequate, but definitely not excellent. And so I decided to use some of my leftover fabric to make a new tea cozy. And I had a pattern that had been given to me by a coworker years ago when I used to work at a craft store. So I have no idea where the origin of this pattern is. She had traced out the pieces for me and typed up some instructions. So no idea. I've made a couple. I did one as a gift for my mother-in-law years ago, and then a few years later one for my brother-in-law for Christmas one year, and never have made one for myself. So here it is. I've put it in my other, it's like a Brown Betty teapot, only it's blue, just because it does fill up the tea cozy a little bit better because it's a bigger teapot. Now, years ago, I had knit this tea cozy for this pot, and it fits it very well. It's just knit out of acrylic yarn. I have no idea where I got the pattern from. It's been so long. But, so it does fit this one better. Now, my original plan was to make the outside out of this yarn and to do the lining out of this yarn. But when I pulled out my fabric, I realized I didn't have enough. And so I did have some leftover charms, 5-inch squares, and so I cut them down the middle, just sewed them in a row on one side, sewed them in a row on the other, and then ended up using this fabric you know, at the top of the pattern. And then I used the contrast for the lining, also for this little ruffle, they call it. It's an elastic that holds these pieces together. And then I did the bow out of the gingham. Probably should have done it out of the other, it would show off more, but I'm not sure if I even had enough, and honestly, it's done now. I'm not redoing it. So how this works is this, just don't want to drop my teapot. This is an elastic loop. It comes off. And then the tea cozy basically are two pieces shaped like that that are sewn to a round bottom, and the center of the, and you just serge or zigzag the edges after you sew the two together, and there's a little pocket in here, and you cut a plastic lid, so say from a margarine container. I don't know what this was from. I found it in my cupboard, so it was perfect. I just trimmed it down to the right size, and that helps protect your you know, table or surface from the hot tea pot. So as I say, this one does not fit in quite as well. I'll put this on. But it's well enough. It covers it, and it definitely does help keep the tea hotter. So very pleased to have finally, well, I shouldn't say finally done this. I know in the back of my mind I've thought that I would make myself one of these one day. Just the time was right, and yeah, I'm really happy to have it. It definitely beats a dishcloth or a tea towel for warmth. The original pattern I had called for Thinsulate to help insulate the pot. I didn't have any, so I just used quilt batting, and that's good enough. Like I say, it's better than just a flimsy tea towel. Alright, so that is all the crafting for this week. I don't have a whole lot more to talk about. As I mentioned last episode, I was planning to head up to the cabin for a couple of days to see my cousin's daughter and her family, and I did do that. I left Wednesday morning and got home sort of late Friday afternoon, so I was only there a couple of nights. Had a good visit with them. They live in northern BC, and it had been, we figured out, 8 years since we'd last seen each other, and since then they have had a little boy who is turning 1 at the end of September. It was really tough not to be able to hold him and cuddle him. He's super cute, but we were very mindful of keeping our social distance. I had planned to take my mom out there both Wednesday and Thursday for happy hour and supper, but for a couple of reasons that didn't work out for Wednesday. But I did go get her Thursday afternoon, and so she was able to visit with them too. And then I cooked her dinner and took her home. So again, we were very careful about social distancing, and we were in the car together, but we wore our masks, and I opened the sunroof and made sure there was some air going through. So I think we'll be fine. I noticed yesterday's BC COVID numbers, the case number was down from what it had been for the last couple of weeks. So hopefully that is a trend. I imagine while I'm recording, there's probably been another, they put out a daily update. So I don't know what it is. I'm just really hopeful that the numbers will start going down, especially with kids going back to school pretty soon. So as I was arriving home, my kids were all taking off to go up to the cabin for the weekend. And it started out with our older son and his fiance wanting to go up to kind of scope things out for their wedding next year. And then our younger son decided to tag along. And then our daughter was able to get Saturday off. And so she and her family actually went from Friday till Monday. So while they were gone, Cameron and I looked after their cats and their outdoor plants and the fish. And they have an indoor cat and an outdoor cat. So the outdoor cat, Friday, the day they were leaving, ended up with probably got into a scrap, maybe with another cat, not sure, ended up with a cut that needed stitches, and so they thought would be best to keep him in all weekend. He's a real outdoor cat, loves to be outdoors. So when we went over Saturday morning, what they had forgotten to tell us is that they were having air conditioning installed that weekend. So there were a couple of guys there working on that, which we weren't expecting. And long story short, the cat got out. And so we spent a little bit of time, finally managed to get him back inside. He was not happy. But then we couldn't find, the next day, I guess it was, we couldn't find the indoor cat anywhere. And I was so worried that they'd let her out by accident. And had been looking, proceeded with the other jobs that I was doing. And then I watched the outdoor cat walk by they have not a china cabinet exactly, but something like that in a hutch, I guess, in their kitchen. And as he walked by it, he gave a little swipe, and I thought, I think I just found the other cat. And sure enough, she was sitting on a stack of placemats on the very bottom shelf, kind of tucked right back there. If it had been for Pippin kind of hissing at her a little bit, we probably would never have found her that day. So anyway, we did that, and then we decided to go golfing on Sunday. Now, if Cameron had his way, we would go golfing every Sunday, and I'm just not that interested. I like to golf, I don't love to golf. So we kind of compromised on going to a local par 3. So even though we played 18 holes, they're much shorter holes. It doesn't take the whole, doesn't take hours and hours to play. And we actually had a really good round. Both of us played well, and it was just a nice temperature. There's lots of trees on the course, and we actually had a really nice time. So it was a good balance. We didn't tee off until just after noon, so we had the morning to kind of relax once we had taken care of the cats and the fish and such. And then we stayed, had a drink and a hot dog at the golf course, and then headed home and had all evening here. So it was really nice way to end the weekend. As I mentioned, the weather is nice, but it's definitely cooled off since last time, thankfully. I have a really hard time sleeping, even with this not so hot weather. I just feel like all night I'm covers on, covers off, covers on, covers off. And I know it's a good deal to do with this time of my life. I am not having the time of my life, though, I can tell you that. But yeah, it's lots of nights I don't sleep really well, including last night, but what do you do? And I'm just trying to think, that it's supposed to apparently get hotter heading into next week, so we'll see. Summer's definitely not over yet, though it's strange to see it getting a little darker earlier and then also be darker, later in the morning. So fall is on its way. While I was driving home, I could see some trees turning color about an hour's drive from here, a little bit further north. So it's coming. When I drove home, the weather was changing, and got a little buzzer set for something there. I'll have to wrap this up pretty soon. You could feel the weather changing. There were a few raindrops that were just starting to fall as I was leaving my mom's, and then it was windy for most of the first half of the trip home, and then had a little bit of a lull, and then I hit the rain and had hard rain for a good part of the second part of the trip home. And then later that evening, it just opened up here and poured. I have not seen it rain that hard for months, and it just came down and came down and came down. So everything got a good soaking, which is not a bad thing. And unfortunately, it meant the kids had to drive through some of that to get up to the cabin that night, but then we woke up to sunshine the next morning, as did they, and they had pretty good weekend weather-wise, as did we. So can't complain too much. Just trying to think if there's anything else. So one viewer had asked me if I would give you guys a little peek at the cabin, since I talk about it so much. So while I was there, I did a little walk around and took some footage and have put it together in a little clip that I will put at the very end of the episode. My something good for this week is getting flowers just because. Cameron took a bunch of cans and bottles and other recyclables to the depot this weekend. And when he came back, he said he spent the proceeds on these. So, they're beautiful. They're getting a bit droopy now, but lovely red roses. So I've had those sitting across from where I knit so I can look at them and enjoy them. Before I wrap things up for this week, I just wanted to acknowledge the wildfires that are burning both here in British Columbia and also, of course, down in California. Hope you are well and safe and that you are not adversely affected by them. And of course, as one side of the country is fighting fires, the other side of the United States is bracing for Hurricane Laura. So again, send you my best wishes and hope that you remain well and safe throughout the storm. Once again, if you're interested in seeing a little bit of where I spend many of my holidays, stick around and you'll find that at the very end of the episode. If you are not, then I will say goodbye to you now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to be back with you again in about a week's time. And so take care until then. Bye. And if you are sticking around, I thought maybe a little bit of background might be helpful before you view the little bit of footage that I've included at the end of this episode. So, my dad has 3 siblings, and he and his family used to go camping. And at some point, his uncle kind of discovered this little lake, and they went camping there, loved it so much they kept returning. In fact, they loved it so much that my grandpa wouldn't tell anybody where it was because he wanted to keep it a secret and keep it as unoccupied as possible. And so with today's vehicles and roads in the condition they are now, it's approximately a 5-hour drive from where my dad used to live up to the cabins. And back then, it would take them overnight, and my grandma would send the groceries up on the train, because there's a little train station right by the lake, and the tracks run alongside the lake, and then they would camp halfway on their way up. And on one of these trips, my grandpa found this piece of property with several buildings on it, not quite a mile away from where the lake is, and made an offer, and it was accepted. So instead of camping, they started spending their holiday time there. And apparently his motto was work in the morning and fish in the afternoon. They were all avid fishermen at that time. So it was my grandma and grandpa's dream, that there would eventually be 4 cabins on the property, one for each of their children. And they would use their cabin as long as was practical, and then it would pass to their oldest child, my uncle, for his family. And so sadly, my grandpa passed away in 1966, so I don't remember him at all. But a couple of years later, our cabin was built. My dad's the youngest in his family. And they all, at the time, were more or less the same style. One large room for a kitchen, dining area, and living area, and then 2 bedrooms. So most of them had large families, and so in our family, with 5 of us children, we had some 2 sets of built-in bunk beds, which are still there today, and then a cot for my oldest sister. And then we didn't have any running water inside. We had water that came from a spring that my grandpa had run across at some point years into owning the property, and he secured water rights for it, and so our water there is spring water. And so we had, at that time, I remember, like one main tap in a shed that had a water-cooled fridge and had these cooler boxes that had water running through them so you could keep your things cool. We also had baskets that we had near every cabin in the creek to keep things like milk and such cool enough. We also didn't have any electricity and used kerosene lamps for light. My mom was deadly afraid of fire. I can hear in my mind, I just over and over about how careful we had to be with it when we would take it in the bedroom to get changed for bed and such. And of course, no running water meant outhouses. So then, kind of in the early 80s, my dad and his siblings all started to retire and started building onto the cabins as their families were increasing, with their children getting married and grandchildren arriving. And so even though things look different than they did when my dad first laid eyes on the property in 1943, it's just a great place for family to come together. I knew my cousins on that side of the family way more than I knew the cousins on my mom's side of the family, even though we actually lived closer to most of them. We spent most of our holidays there, not just as a kid, but also as an adult. Now for us, it's just about a 3.5-hour drive from here, and nice, cheap holiday, very peaceful. So I think that's all I have to say. I noticed in the video I mentioned that my grandpa had built his cabin, but apparently my mom said actually it was one of the original buildings on the site, and that they had just added a bedroom area onto it. And then later on, my uncle, who inherited that cabin, did even more renovations and additions to it. So, hope you enjoy what you see. So I will see you next week. Bye. I am in a very unique situation. I am here alone at the cabins, which never happens. I'm waiting for my cousin to arrive, and I'm going to go in to town shortly to pick up my mom. This is looking towards one end of our property, and I'll give you a little turn around. This is across from the cabin door. That's looking up the road towards the mountain. There's limestone mountains up there. And then here is looking down the yard. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 cabins. This is ours. The deck, it was new last year with the railing. There's my new red car. How about I walk us over to the creek? So here's a look at part of the creek that runs through our property. It runs behind all of the cabins and from basically one end to the other. Shed and pump house over there. And this is what used to be my grandma and grandpa's cabin, and then later became for my oldest uncle's family to use. Listen to that sound. This is one of my favorite sights and sounds ever. This is looking off of the porch of our cabin towards the road, and I just love to hear the sound of the wind in the trees. Here's one of the most iconic things about our cabin site, and that is this garden swing that my grandpa originally built, and it has been mended several times since. Let's go for a ride. We used to spend hours on this swing pretending it was a train. We used to have old purses with old playing cards in it that we used for money and tickets. I can only get a slow move on here now. The swing seems to sink a little bit every year, and kind of have to dig out a track before we use it. This is where all that growth is. The creek is on the other side of that. That squeak is, again, one of those noises that are just so familiar. This shed with the wagon wheels is another iconic sight. According to the note on the shed, the wheels were given to my grandfather by a friend who used to haul freight between Ashcroft and Horsefly along the original Caribou Road. Those of you who live in BC will have some idea of where that is. And then if we turn this way, this is one of the original buildings that was on the property when my grandparents bought it in 1943, and it has since been added on to. And then if we look the other way, this is the other side of my grandparents' cabin, and they built that here after they had bought the property. It has also been added on to. The shed to the right is a new building too. All of the cabins have changed since they were originally built as families expanded. So here's another look at my grandma's cabin, this time from the front. And to the left, you can see the garden swing. And next to it is one of the other original buildings from the site. It used to sit up close to the road, next to the gate, before it was moved into its current position. Apparently, the property used to be some sort of mill, and that building was the office. And then again, there's our cabin down at the end. Look at the size of these two trees. We used to have a tire swing in the far one. Here's a look at the property from a different perspective. That limestone mountain I showed you earlier is behind me, and you can see our cabin there down at the end. If you followed the right slope of the mountain that is in the background here, you would land in the lake. It's maybe a mile from here, a good 10 to 15 minute walk after dinner, or any other time for that matter. So that concludes our little tour of our cabins and vacation property. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.